I took a class at Harvard from a former congressman named Mickey Edwards. He's a brilliant guy, Republican, brilliant guy, and he taught up there. And everybody would always ask him, you know, Congressman, why did you leave? And he said, to be a congressman costs a $2 million campaign. This is 10 years ago, and he kind of inflated the numbers, to be honest. It was really about a $1 million campaign. But he had it worked out in his mind that he had to raise $6,000 a day or whatever it was to be competitive to win his seat. And he didn't want to raise $6,000 a day every day for 2 years. And so he got out of it. So that's a cold fact of life about the fundraising is, you know, that's how much time they have to spend doing it. Now, since '92, the amount of time as a proportion of their daily schedule that they do it has come down because the internet, and we'll get back to this later, but about half the money now in most campaigns, even at a smaller level, is starting to come over the internet. Now that means they still probably called and asked them, but the money's coming through the internet. So you can spend a little less time doing the phones eventually, but you still it all starts with someone asking for the money, okay? And just always remember, the candidate is the best person. If you don't care enough to be willing to ask someone for money, then you don't care enough to do what it takes to be in office. It's that simple, in my mind. So that leads us to targets. Okay, so now we know how to raise money, or at least we know the answer to the big question, the overview of, well, how do you do it? Well, you ask for it. Okay, and that'll lead me to who you ask and how you ask for it, what methods you use to ask for it. But the first thing after we know what the main question is then, okay, well, who are we going to ask? So this is the targets. And in every campaign, the best targets are always people that you know, okay? Let me say it again. It's people that you know. This is a classic candidate thing to say to me. A first-time candidate come to me and say, I want to raise money, great. Say, who do you know? I know a few hundred people, but I don't want to ask them. I want to ask people that give to campaigns. And I always have a chuckle, and I say, well, the people that give to campaigns are the people that know those folks running, okay? So it always usually starts, or always, not usually, it always starts with who the candidate knows. So who you know, all right? That's the first most important group. And who you know encompasses maybe who you went to high school with, who you went to college with, who you played sports with, who you're in a band with, who you're in the fraternities or sororities with, who you're in political groups with, whoever it may be. It's somebody that knows you that tangentially, clear down to, you know, your best friend and your Uncle Louie. Okay, so there's a universe, the first universe that you always start with in fundraising are people you know, okay? Because if they know you, they're already a lot more likely to give to you than those that don't know you. Okay, so we always start with that universe. And that also within that universe, we go from who you know to, you know, our like groups, which I just discussed. And then another way to build it out that you see a lot is by occupation, okay? So in other words, I'm an insurance agent or I'm a real estate agent and I'm running for the State House in Victoria or Houston or wherever, and I go around and I've asked everybody I know to give me money, and I've tapped out all that universe. Well, then I go to who's most next like me, and a lot of times it starts with those in the same occupation. So if I'm an insurance agent in Houston, I might start going around to, you know, the different suburbs that are close to my district and making the case to other insurance agents that I'll represent our interests well in the legislature or whatever it may be that you're running for, and so you start to work groups like that. Okay, and that will lead you into what I eventually call the cold universe. When I say cold, I just mean people who don't already know you. Okay, and within that cold universe lies that group of people that candidates always refer to as, well, those that give to campaigns. Yes, it's true. There are a percentage of folks out there that will give, you know, to 10 or 15 campaigns. They usually only give to one side or the other. They're usually pretty partisan, and they usually have a large interest in the public process. So there are a universe of those kind of folks, but once you get to them, you have to, you know, you have to introduce yourself. You have to make them a friend. You have to explain to them why it's important that you're running. You have a lot more hurdles to overcome before you're ever going to get to that point where you're comfortable enough to just flat out ask them for money. Okay? So I always caution you, start with those that you know and build out from there. Then eventually get to your colder targets who are, quote, traditional givers. All right? So that's a little bit about targeting. Solicitation methods. this is simply what it sounds like. What's the best way to ask? What's the best way to solicit a donation? Well, unless you're running for president, the number one way to ask for a donation and to get it is to call or meet with the donor in person, okay? Meeting with them is the most effective, because then you engage all their senses as you ask them for money. And in return, all their senses become employed, and it makes it harder for them to say no. If you're on the phone, same sort of thing, but less so. You're not looking them dead in the eye. You're not giving them body language. You're not doing all this sort of thing. You're just flat asking for the money, and your voice, it's all about your words, and the inflection may change and all that, but it's a less personal feeling than in a meeting. So on the phone is the second best way. Those two ways, just so you know, those two ways are 100% better than every other way. Easy, okay? So the classic thing, first-time candidate, let's send a letter to everyone I know. Well, no, that's a bad idea. If you want to send them a letter saying, I'm running, and this is why I'm running, so they know what's going on before you call them, that's fine. But to think that you're going to send a letter and that money's magically going to appear, even if you ask for it in the body of the letter, it's just not going to happen. Okay? You're not motivated by a letter. I mean, how much, as you all get older, I can imagine your parents get mail at home like this. You know, when I was your age, it was probably like this, but now it's like this. And I go on the road for a week or something, and I come home, and literally the mail's in a box. So I got to, you know, like I'm going to fish out a fundraising letter and say, oh yeah, I've been dying to write, you know, Joe Smith a check for $250 and go to his fish fry. No, it's just not human nature. It's not. It doesn't move us enough to want to do it, okay? So mail is a technique, but it needs to be followed up with by a call or a meeting. Yes?
How do you decide how much to ask for? Put a number on it?
The classic question. I always say whatever you think they can give, and then add 25%, okay? So if someone called and asked me for money, you know, they would surmise that, you know, I have a 5-year-old car, and you know, a professional job, and own a house, and they'd say, well, maybe Jeff can give $250, you know, without it breaking the bank or whatever. You know, that might be a reasonable judgment. Someone my age, you'd say, maybe I'll ask him for $250 or $500. Okay, so if you want to ask me for $250, I would usually say, crank it up a little and say to Jeff, you know, can you raise $350, or could you give $350? So it's a feel thing, and you'll go through, as you begin the process, you know, you start to develop a feel real fast for how much you should ask for. Another important thing to know about when you ask what amount to ask for is remember that that first universe of people who know you are going to be your most likely givers, and then typically that universe will double and then double again as the campaign goes on. Okay? So usually a donor, if they give once, they usually will give 2 or 3 times. So in knowing that you're going to go back to someone a few times, it's not always vital to get the highest number first. It's helpful. It just means less time down the road. But I always hear candidates say, well, I asked for 1,000 and they said yes right away. Darn, I should ask for 1,500. And I say, no, we'll wait 3 months and we'll ask them for another 1,000. You see, so don't get wrapped up in the amount. Take your best guess and roll with it. And here's the other thing. People always say, well, you know, won't they be offended if I've asked them for too much money? And I've sat with candidates making, you know, literally tens of thousands of these calls, and I think maybe once or twice somebody actually got offended. Think about human nature. If somebody says to you, you know, Amy Jacks, I know you can give me $5,000. Can you give it to me this week? You smile and you kind of giggle and you feel like, well, that's nice of you to say, but no, I can't, right? But you don't get mad. She's not looking at me mad right now. She's kind of giggling about it, which is exactly how the donor reacts. They say, oh, that's sweet. You think I have that much money? No, but I can give you 500. And you say, great. And you take the 500 and you write it down on your sheet and you go, okay, well, I'll come back for my other 500 later. That's the drill, okay? And so, again, we're talking about what are the best solicitation methods. And just so you really hear me, the best way is to ask for it in person. The second best way is to ask for it over the phone.